that you just didn't see from the Minnesota Vikings. And perhaps they're reading their press clippings a little bit, smelling that perfume a little bit too much. And boy, maybe we are really good. And then you come out and you get humbled. And Kevin O'Connell said it. That's the thing that can happen in this league, and you end up with one of the worst losses in franchise history. But I think it is an impressive performance by the Cowboys to go into that hostile environment. I'm sure that crowd was hopped up and ready to go, and they neutralized it. They took them out of the game early. And when you have somebody like Micah Parsons making those plays, when you have Tony Pollard on the other side making them pay, even Zeke Elliott, you get close to the end zone, he puts the ball in the box. Those things are really important, and that can help you as you get to this stretch run of the NFL season.
I'm really excited about the second Philadelphia-Dallas game this year, and I'll tell you what really interested me about the Eagles game on Sunday in Indianapolis. You can sit there and say, well, they had no right to win the game, and they really didn't play that well. And, you'd probably be right about they didn't really play that well. But I think they had every right to win that game, and I'll tell you why. They're down 13-3 with 16 minutes left in the game. Okay? And they're down 13-3, and yet Jalen Hurts, who we keep wondering about, we keep having questions about, is he really the guy? Is he this? I mean, I think he's answered just about every question you could have for him. And he leads them on drives of 60, and 75 yards. And basically, he came through when they absolutely had to have it. Because to me, a second straight loss, and then everybody in that locker room is starting to say, uh-oh. But instead of having that, you come with two fourth quarter long drives, and you come with these drives, and all of a sudden, no more questions. You're 9-1. You've got the best record in football.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's one of those deals where you get a short week, you got to go on the road. And I thought that it was really interesting what Nick Sirianni was saying after the game, where they asked him about Frank Reich, and he says, well, you probably don't really want to know what I think about that. And it's like, well, Nick Sirianni was coaching emotionally this week. And I don't know, yeah. Peter, I think back to a game I covered 2017. The Rams were playing Washington at the Coliseum, and it was the first time Sean McVay had to coach against Jay Gruden. And later on, he admitted, like, I was coaching emotionally in that game, and that probably didn't help us. And I think sometimes when that happens, it just doesn't, you don't do the things that you normally do. And it puts maybe a little more stress on yourself than you would usually have. Yeah. So yeah. I think there might have been some element of that with Philadelphia, but the fact that they were able to overcome it, right, and win that game at the end, I think says a lot about the mental fortitude of that team, because you have to be able to really get some things done late in the game in order to execute, and they were able to do it.
Miles, we're going to segue to Jimmy Johnson right now. I recently was forwarded a book that Johnson wrote with Dave Hyde called Swagger. And, I get a lot of these books in the mail. Most of them I just skim. But I said, I knew I was going to have Jimmy on the podcast. And so I said, okay, I'm going to sit down and read this. And it's a very quick read, some really good stories. Great honesty in there about Don Shula. Oh my God, that took some ugly turns. So, but anyway, I'm just going to let Jimmy tell you some of these stories. Let's go to our guest, Jimmy Johnson. Miles and I will be back on the other side. Happy to be joined by Jimmy Johnson to discuss his new book, Swagger, written with Dave Hyde. And Jimmy, I want to start by talking about something that I always felt was a hugely important part of your success that is all over this book. And that is the fact that when you're the leader of a team or the leader of anything, confrontation is important. Yeah. And you reminded me a lot of Bill Parcells, because early on in your tenure in Dallas, because that's the way Parcells was. And just, you tell this story in the book, but you early on, because I covered you a lot, you were a rising star. Your team was great. And one time we were together after a game, and you said to me, Peter, if you fuck me on this story, I will squash you like a squirrel in the road. But you probably think, oh boy, I put him in his place. I actually loved it
Yeah.
because it showed me that this is how you kind of operate, and this is how you have to operate in the high stakes world of the NFL. I want you to explain to me where you learned that and how it became a part of your ethos.
Peter, I think not only confrontation, but interaction. I visited with Brian Dable, who's doing a great job with the Giants, before the season started. And I told him, I said, and I've told other guys that became a head coach for the first time, I said, you're an offensive coordinator. You walk down that hall, and really nobody gave a damn. Nobody paid attention to you. I said, but now you walk down that hall, every head will turn.
Yeah.
And if you're going to have a successful organization, it won't be just the X's and O's. You've got to have interaction with the secretary, the administrative assistant, the backup offensive guard, the intern coach. Because let me tell you, no one likes to be ignored, but especially no one wants to be ignored by the leader. And Brian even said, he said, I take pizza down to the equipment people, just to get the whole building on the same page. People used to talk when we were in Dallas and we were 1-15. They said, somebody would complain to one of the coaches and they say, hey, this is the way Jimmy wants to do it. This is the way we're going to do it. There was never a chink in our armor. We were always on the same page. Kind of what Parcells used to say, one voice. That's the way it is. And if everybody believes the same way, and obviously there's interaction, suggestions, go it this way, go it that way. But when you have an end result that we're all working together, for a common goal.
I thought there were 3 or 4 things in this book that I just simply did not know, and which I found really, really interesting. I knew that you sort of had a rough relationship with Don Shula, but I didn't realize how it originated. And it actually originated with his son, Dave Shula, right, where you, in fact, kind of demoted Dave when you were in Dallas, and you called Don as sort of a courtesy,
yes,
on this. And tell me the story, and also sort of tell me where you think it all went wrong with Don Shula.
Well, I really didn't know him that well. I'd gone to a couple of his practices when I was at University of Miami, and so I wanted to hire Dave Wanstead. And Dave had taken a job with Don. So I went to and talked to Don and said, I want to hire Dave Wanstead off your staff. And, right off the bat, he didn't know that there's going to be a change in Dallas. He said, well, Tom Landry, I understand he's had 3 straight losing seasons, but what about Tex Schramm? Because Tex was a buddy of his. I said, I don't know anything about Tex. Jerry's going to have to make the decision on that. I said, but I want to hire Dave Wanstead. And he said, how about Wanstead and my son, Dave Shula? And I kind of got the message, and so I hired Dave. And so after the second year, I ended up being coach of the year in that second year because we nearly made the playoffs, and I wanted to hire Norv Turner. And so I called Don out of a courtesy. I said, I'm going to have Dave be our passing coordinator and work, with the receivers. And Don was, oh man, I thought he'd be okay with it. But he said, hey, Dave, big part of you becoming coach of the year, and you can't do that. And he cussed me out. And so I end up, he worked with the Bengals and got Dave head coach there with Cincinnati. So it never was a problem. But then he kind of thought that maybe I ushered him out of the Dolphins, which I had nothing to do with. I mean, I was happily retired down in the Keys.
Yeah.
And Nick Bonicani called me and said, "Hey, Shula's out with the Dolphins." I said, "Really?" And I didn't know that. And he said, "Have you talked to Wayne Heising?" I said, "I've never talked to him. I don't even know him." And so Eddie Jones, the general manager, or the president, called my attorney, Nick.